And now we bring you Killer Wives, Episode 16, Coach Killer. These are the case facts against Julie Harper, who shot her husband while her children watched cartoons. Isn't trust a bitch? San Diego, California. Famous residents Deepak Chopra, Cameron Diaz, Nick Cannon, but also made famous for the murder of one Mr. Jason Harper.
Negative K, nothing further, just City Canby in the corner.
Question: at what point does a Harvard graduate real estate broker turned stay-at-home mom make a conscious decision to shoot and kill her husband? A man so loved by a community of thousands because he taught geometry and coached volleyball at the local high school. If you are a regular viewer of Killer Wives, you know that we report murders around cases of suspected domestic violence, as well as non-violent homes as an impetus to murder. In some cases, there were accusations of sexual abuse, and others a completely sexless marriage. This next case involves accusations concerning all of those scenarios. On this particular sunny Tuesday morning of August the 7th, 2012, an argument was brewing in the bedroom of a couple who had the makings of a good divorce. The deadly disagreement between them began at around 8 a.m. that day and originated from the coach's wife hiding his desktop computer. Coach's wife knew that she hid the computer he was looking for under the bed, but neglected to tell him out of spite. Frustrated now, Coach Harper shouted to his wife that he was tired of her either moving or hiding his things. You see, Coach Harper's wife had a tendency of not only hiding stuff from him, but from the family as well. A cell phone was purchased for his youngest son because his wife took the batteries out of their house phone and hid it in the closet where the children could not access it. So when Coach Harper's computer was missing from where it normally would be, he knew it was his wife and not his young children who had moved it. But where? You see, the room that this argument originated in, as well as the whereabouts of that computer, was not Mr. Harper's room, which is why Coach Harper was never aware that that computer was hidden just beneath the bed. You see, he couldn't have known of her hiding spot because the couple were sleeping in two separate bedrooms at his wife's behest for several months now. It seemed as if everything that originated from his wife was a blindside to him. In fact, Miss Harper had just recently applied for a divorce just 5 days before she would kill her husband. Additionally, Miss Harper did not let her husband know that she had also withdrawn $10,000 from their daughter's college fund and deposited that money into her own personal account. Nor did she tell her husband that she had taken out 2 separate withdrawals against his credit card with checks forged in his name totaling over $25,000. You see, all in all, a pretty secretive woman at the 11th year of marriage. If anything, one would imagine that a relationship would grow closer and more trusting with the years as opposed to more distant, dishonest, and completely deadly. You would think so, right? To me, the actions of filing for a divorce on the same week you rob your family's fortune is a clear recipe for premeditated murder. As the Harpers carried on their usual way of disagreement upstairs, their 3 children, ages 8, 6, and 18, were watching children's cartoons in the downstairs living room. From this point in the story, we take off from Mrs. Harper's version of the story, as we do not have her husband's version due to his death. Now, back upstairs, Miss Harper's paints a story where she feared of her life that morning and that she believed her husband was coming to rape her and then kill her. In her own words, she says that he grabbed at her and started pulling at her clothes. In her fabricated version of this story, she says that somehow she manages to break free from a 200-pound, 7-foot-tall man, run over to the bed at the other side of the room, reach under the pillow to grab her Derringer .38 caliber handgun. Miss Harper claimed that she feared her husband would catch her, and she wanted to keep the argument away from the kids and in the room. She says she remembers pointing a gun at him to defend herself once he said the words, and I quote, "Bitch, I'm gonna kill you," end quote. Miss Harper will later testify at her trial that the gun accidentally discharged as her husband lunged towards her in an attempt to kill her. She will present this case against a firearm trigger pull test that requires 10 pounds pressure in order to engage that particular weapon. She then states that after she shot him, she witnessed him immediately stop and fall like a tree in the forest as she faced him. Remember her version of the story as well as the position of both parents, because it will be her undoing at her subsequent trial. Now, downstairs, the Harper's children might not have heard their father being shot, but they certainly heard him let out the most painful groan they had ever heard, as well as a thud of his body hitting the floor, which he fell. Concerned, the 2 oldest children rushed up to the room to see what was the matter. Miss Harper, hearing the children rapidly approaching, immediately do what people do once they perform unrecoverable acts. She threw a blanket over their father's collapsed body and answered the room door like nothing had ever gone wrong. She assured the coach's children that everything was fine and that Daddy had only fallen off of a chair he had been standing on. What a lie. Now, these are not the words of a victim of domestic violence or rape, people. And she would later claim that at trial against her husband. Now, this would be the first lie of many Miss Harper would tell her children, the judge, the jury, and anyone else who would care to listen to her mess. Now, let's back up a minute and pre-analyze one of the first lies that she would tell the jury in covering her ass. Now, remember, she said that her husband was coming at her in a threatening fashion, which left her no other choice but to defend herself by shooting him. She would utter at trial that she was scared because he was a big man that was 7 foot tall. Now, my question then was, how long was he a big man? Was it when she claimed he was attacking her? Or since the day she first dated and then married her? You see, the frontal attack would turn out to be the biggest conundrum for her defense attorney to explain to the jury or for the jury to swallow. For you see, the autopsy on Coach Harper's body will conclusively determine that the bullets that killed him entered his body from under his left armpit and from behind, not facing his assailant, Miss Harper, like she initially said. Now, the second lie would reveal more of her character. It would appear the distance was off as well. The autopsy on Coach revealed not only was he shot in the back, but at a distance of some 5 feet away from her when she did it. I find that in most cases in which a wife kills her husband, that she adjusts the facts to fit a victim narrative in order not to get a life in prison sentence or death sentence. You see, yes, it would seem as if this decent, loving, caring, afraid to be assaulted woman just shot her husband in the back as he was exiting the room, and not at all at the lunging toward her attack that she had manufactured. But what of the coach's children? Believing their mother, the children were back in front of the television laughing at cartoons they had just taken a break from in the living room. With them out of the way, this gave Miss Harper time to react to her husband's injured body. So what did the brave Miss Harper do? Did she A, turn to render the father of her children medical assistance in order to save his life? B, call 911 to get the paramedics to come over to the house and save her husband's life? Or C, pile as much trash and junk on top of the body in order to make it look like a pile of junk instead of a dying man? Ding, 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 you guessed it. The answer is C. Miss Harper, the pillar of the community, first attempt to cover up the murder was to literally cover it up. Just before she completely covered his body, she took his wallet out of his pocket, and along with his cell phone from his pocket. Miss Harper took the battery out of his cell phone in order that no one could call him or know his true location. It would seem as if Miss Harper was becoming more rapidly adept at covering her tracks or covering her ass. She gathered a ready-packed small book bag in which she packed her passport as well as the passports of all three children. It would seem as if Miss Harper was a flight risk after murder and that she had the money to go anywhere in the world at that moment if she chose to do so. The only wrinkle in that plan was three little children. It would not be as easy to pretend that they were resettling in a foreign land overnight without their father as it was that he fell off a chair in the bedroom. In that ready-made backpack, she placed Coach Harper's cell phone as well as hers after removing the battery from both devices. It would also appear that she was familiar with criminal cases in which the accused location are tracked through her telephone records. The only time she would re-engage the battery in her own phone is when she wanted to make a call. In that bag, she would also place the ill-gotten booty she had recently stole from her family, namely the $39,000 in cold hard cash. In that bag also she placed her husband's last will and testament and a different handgun with a fully loaded magazine clip. Yes, Mother Harper gathered and dressed her children. She had them await her in the house as she performed one of the last devious cover-ups before leaving that house. She took the keys to her husband's Ford SUV and parked it over on another block in an attempt to hide friends and family as well as police from finding it. She then scurried back home, placed her now fatherless children into her 2000 gold Toyota Sienna. Now later that night, Jason Harper's Ford SUV was found in the neighborhood about 12:20 p.m. after a citywide all-points bulletin for both cars. In Julie's Cover Her Ass campaign, she was smart enough to leave the gate card in the house that would have activated the exit of that exclusive gated community. She was well aware that all of the vehicles in that exclusive gated community had personal magnetized key cards that recorded your every moment within that community for the safety's sake of the citizens. This is why she had to leave that key card there in the home if she was looking to frame a stranger for her husband's murder. You see, Julie would leave as any other visiting car would through those same gates, as a blank exit. Julie Harper didn't want her movements tracked by cell phone or car. I believe she came up with this plan shortly after killing her husband and not before. She wanted to make it appear as if there was a home invasion in her and the children were both absent when it took place, when her husband was robbed of his wallet, his cell phone, and shot and killed. That was just one of her plans. A last minute, but a plan. You see, in her attempt to establish alibis on the move while she was driving away, Julie re-engaged her phone. Next, Miss Harper tried to set up play dates for the children, but no one could do anything on such short notice. It would seem that she was stuck with three small children while formulating her excuse for murder. Julie needed a temporary place to lay low as the hours went by until she could formulate a new getaway plan. She decided to take the children out for breakfast because they had not eaten it as of yet. She took them to La Costa Coffee Roasting for coffee and sandwiches, the best meal after murder. Now, after she and the children were full, she took them to play at a local children's activity center and then arranged for her sister to watch her kids during the afternoon without telling her that she had recently killed her husband. So imagine you're taking your children to your sister's house and you're not going to engage in the fact that you just killed your own spouse. On the afternoon of that shooting, while Julie Harper was visiting several area business with her children, a text message was sent from the deceased Jason's cell phone to his brother that read, "I'm out running errands. Tell Mom I'll see her Friday." Now that message was sent around 11:46 a.m., almost 3 hours after Jason was shot. So I don't believe Jason sent that happy message from the position that his body was lying on the floor. It didn't happen. And since his phone was in the possession of his wife the whole time, she most likely sent it in order to throw people off of the fact that he would be missing in the near future. After dropping off her children at her unsuspecting sister's house, Julie drove to her father's house where she said that she buried the gun that was used to kill her husband. She spoke to her father and told him everything that had just transpired. Now, did her father ask her to call an ambulance or the police? No. He advised her that she needed a lawyer first and then the authorities could be involved. Once her father secured the most high-priced famous lawyer in the area, did he feel comfortable with letting the authorities get involved? I mean, not right away. The lawyer was allowed to depose her, give her advice, collect his upfront fee, and then only then were the police telephoned. Prior to the police arrival, her attorney, in my opinion, tampered with the evidence by taking possession of the book bag full of passports and cash. He removed several $1,000s from that goofy bag to pay for her father's defense, as she involved him in a murder plot as well. After the fact, mind you. Around 11 p.m. that night, Carlsbad police were called by Julie Harper's defense attorney to perform a welfare check on the home that she had abandoned with her dead husband. A welfare check is a long ways off from you should expect a dead body in the house when you get there. See, police arrived on the scene 2 hours later, and that is when they discovered the body of Jason Harper and launched a search for the other missing members of the family. They thought Julie and the children were missing. You see, Jason was still lying there where Miss Harper had left him dead, shot in the back, face down on the floor, some 14 hours earlier. That's right, I said 14 hours had elapsed between the time she shot her husband and the time the attorney, not her, called the police to report the incident. Her attorney had previously been the district attorney for the town for the last 8 years. So when he called the police station concerning the welfare check, it was not through the normal 911 channels that you would use. From his experience as district attorney, he knew of several inside telephone lines to call at the police station that would not be recorded and then used against his client during trial. This guy was on the defense long before Julie's case ever went to trial. Her attorney gave the police no other information beyond the fact that he was representing his client in this case due to attorney-client privileges. In fact, he would not allow Miss Harper to make any statements to the police all the way up to the trial itself. By the time the police entered the home that late night and found the body of Mr. Harper, over 16 hours had elapsed. 16 hours. The former teacher/coach lay hidden under a bunch of bedding, garbage, and odd items. From the investigator's vantage point, you could see that the lower portion of Mr. Harper's face had appeared to be blackened from where the blood had pooled in the lower portion of his body. This phenomenon, known as livor mortis, also called hypostasis, is the pooling of blood in the body due to gravity or the lack of blood circulating as a result of cessation of cardiac activity. These factors cause the blood to pool in the lowest points of the body, giving the skin a purplish red discoloration, blackening over time. As investigators pulled back the layers of junk she had piled atop his body, they could see a dried blood stain on the left side of his body, just under the armpit, where the bullet went into his body between his ribcage and to his heart. A lucky shot by anybody's standards, mind you. Now, the coroner surmised that Mr. Harper probably died immediately, but his wife would not have known that or cared about that. She never considered calling for assistance. On that morning, coffee and bagels were her biggest concern after crossing off murder on her to-do list. She never considered anything beyond saving her own tail. Now, later that evening, more than 24 hours after the shooting, investigators arrested Julie Harper at her father's home in the Scripps Ranch, California. Since Julie was insisting this killing was a crime of passion based upon domestic violence that had recently taken place, they needed proof. Julie was taken to a special room at the police station where she could medically be examined and stripped down to her underwear, bra, and panties. Several photos were taken of her entire body to document the abuse. The only problem with the abuse scenario was that the medical personnel and police could find no evidence, ladies and gentlemen, no evidence to substantiate this particular claim. This was not a case of defense, but a case of cold-blooded murder disguised as a crime of passion. Without assistance from Julie, prosecutors put together a timeline of events. They revealed that at the scene they couldn't locate the murder weapon, the victim's wallet, or the victim's cell phone. In fact, the actual gun that tied to the shooting still has not been found to this day. Jason's brother Brian Harper, along with parents Homer and Lena Harper, attended Julie's pretrial hearing. Jason's mother said at the hearing, "We can't believe he is gone. We're all heartbroken that his children no longer have their dad. Lena shared the last photograph she had of Jason with reporters outside the courtroom. The image was captured several weeks ago on a day when Jason and his children were visiting, and Lena noted Jason cared for his 18-month-old child himself the entire day. This and other similar statements would be echoed by Coach Harper's neighbors and friends who also saw him taking care of children instead of his wife. They didn't know that she spent more days either sleeping in bed or stoned by painkillers. But though all of that, her overspending, Coach Harper never divorced his wife. In fact, he went back to work full-time when she decided to quit her career. In court records obtained by the North County Times newspaper, Julie Harper filed for divorce just days before Jason's death. Prosecutors allege Julie Harper had 2 handguns registered in her name, but neither was found inside the home. State Prosecutor Watanabe said detectives also found a number of medications prescribed to Miss Harper in the home, including OxyContin and oxycodone and hydrocodone, which is the generic form of Vicodin. Miss Harper pleaded not guilty to charges. She was then held on a $2 million bail. Mrs. Harper was subsequently released after her family put up 10% required as bail money and allowed to go back at the home she had recently killed her husband in. Her children were not in her possession because the state took them at a safe hospital location after her arrest and then turned them over to Coach Harper's parents. Good parents. Julie stood trial for the murder of her husband but was acquitted of first-degree murder and the shooting of the death of Jason at the end of her first trial in September of 2014. A mistrial was declared when the jury could not agree on the lesser charges. The prosecutor immediately filed paperwork for a new trial for the second-degree murder charges, as first-degree murder charges were off the table when she was acquitted of that charge in the first trial. I guess double jeopardy works even for actual criminals as well as the innocent. Now, the prosecutor would seek to retrial the wife under second-degree murder charges, which do not require a high bar of premeditation like first-degree murder charges. The prosecutor knew what to expect out of his victim's focused widow, and so he was prepared to meet her head-on in the next case. But Miss Harper and the killer, being a killer, still had an ace up her sleeve. She wanted to play this too. For no sooner did she receive notice of the new trial did Miss Harper go out and find a man to make herself pregnant. She believed that this would be a good ploy to get the trial delayed or deferred entirely. When she was asked by several media sources about who the father was, did she make up an excuse that the pregnancy was due to in vitro fertilization? According to court papers at the time, the prosecutor was suspicious of the claim that this was an intentional in vitro fertilization pregnancy. The prosecutor claims that a neighbor witnessed reported seeing a man in his underwear staying in the master bedroom of the Harper's home 6 months ago around the time of the first trial. Prosecutor Watanabe named a man who he said is Julie Harper's former lover and fiance. The defendant allegedly wrote the man a letter 17 days after she shot her husband and referred to him as the love of her life. Now, Julie Harper admitted in her testimony during her first trial that this man was the .45 caliber handgun that was registered in her name, that he possessed it, but mysteriously missing from the crime scene. The prosecutors wanted to request a special hearing to question this man. Once again, he said the defendant is engaging in disturbing manipulation of the criminal justice system. The prosecutor claimed in a moving papers he filed during trial. In Julie's second trial, the prosecutor asserted that the deterioration of Julie Harper over the past several years, which he claims is due to the abuse of her prescription opiate medications. She had several, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the prosecutor did the math, and he calculated that Julie was issued 4,025 narcotic pills in 355 days. That's less than a year. And that comes out to about 10 opiate pills per day and 1.5 sleeping pills per day. The prosecutor alleged that the 52 prescription bottles were located in the same room where the deceased husband's body was found, and those medications included OxyContin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, Valium, and morphine. The prosecutor claims that Julie Harper was rarely seen outside of the house, and that Jason Harper was forced to work full-time and care for the kids simultaneously. Now, The people believe it was unfair of the defense to characterize Mrs. Harper as a good, loving mother without allowing the jury to see the full extent of her narcotic use. The prosecutors also asked permission to allow jurors to pull the trigger of the Derringer in the courtroom because the defendant testified, remember, it was this exact firearm that she used to kill Jason Harper and that it was hard to pull. So they allowed that in court. Now, the actual murder weapon has never been found, like I said before. And so prosecutors had to supply a duplicate. Now, that's what you have to do sometime in court. She did not want that weapon to be found. Now, the .38 caliber Dillinger pistol that she had was registered to her father's name because it shows a record of her purchasing one, but her father owns that same type weapon. The prosecutor wanted jurors to feel the pull of the trigger because the defendant claimed she did not intentionally pull the trigger. Now, the prosecution alleges Julie had planned to kill her husband, Jason, right? She planned to kill him and then run, presenting surveillance evidence, shots of her withdrawing large amounts of money from the bank just before she shot him dead that day, ladies and gentlemen. Not a week ago, that day. So she had been doing it over a week, but especially that day. She disposed of the murder weapon. She disposed of the murder weapon, and she assembled a getaway bag of a different gun, her passport, $39,000 in cash, and Jason Harper's last will and testament. Right? What are you doing with a dead man's last will and testament if you don't want to be a spouse? But the defense argues that the getaway bag, right, this is an opposite team, is what abused wives are advised to assemble should they have to flee in an emergency. Julie also claims Jason had raped her some 30 times during their marriage. She says she didn't think anyone would believe her if she reported them. Now, Julie also says she never even meant to kill her husband, that she pulled the trigger by accident as Jason was coming towards her in a rage. At Julie's retrial, the second jury convicted her of second-degree murder with the weapon modification charge that tacked on an additional 25 years to her 15-year second-degree murder charge. Julie Harper was sentenced to a 40-year to life in prison. Now, I've served 9 years in the military myself and about 1 year in combat. And I've fired several weapons to include the M16, to include a grenade launcher, to include a .45 caliber, to include a Bradley 25mm chain gun, a 7.62 machine gun, and a .25. Now, those weapons have trigger pulls. They are not easy to pull. Some are very gentle, some are difficult. Now, Mrs. Harper also had weapons training. So she was not a novice. Even her resume says that she has weapons training and is a karate expert. So she probably didn't have to use a weapon to own her husband. So, for Killer Wives, this is Charles Rivers. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next time when we bring you another one of these cases on Killer Wives.